What is NoLimits SelfManagement and why should we care? To answer that question, we should first ask the question, what is management? Management is simply a social technology used to get things done in organizations. It's planning, organizing, controlling, selecting, and coordinating. These happen to be functions that all of us already engage in our own personal lives on a regular basis. Planning is strategy. Organizing is leadership. Controlling is budgeting. Selecting is hiring and firing. Coordinating is teamwork. And how did these functions become embedded in what we think of as the modern organization? Well, it really started with a train wreck on the Western Railway on October 5th of 1841, where two locomotives collided on the Western Railway, killing a conductor, another passenger, and injuring 17 people. And so the railroad employed an investigator, Major George Whistler, a civil engineer, to investigate the wreck and create recommendations, which he did. And he looked at the Prussian army for inspiration. And so his recommendations were quite bureaucratic. They included silos and chains of command and lines of authority and departments. He used the word managers in business for the very first time. And a prime directive of this recommendation was to fix blame, to fix what Whistler called derelictions of duty, and to identify those derelictions and fix them so that they would not happen again in the future. So when we look at that modern organization and the structure that ensued from it, we have what we would recognize as the modern org chart, where we have a boss sitting on top of people who are subordinates, and the boss has command authority and can exercise that command authority with the expectation that his or her commands will be obeyed by his or her subordinates. So we have the modern organizational structure. So, how well is traditional management working out in the 21st century? Let me identify 5 costs of traditional management that are very destructive to human flourishing. The first one is what Michele Zanini and Gary Hamel called the management tax. This is the cost of indirect and direct bureaucracy in excess of what is needed. The excess cost of bureaucracy, in their estimation, is about $3 trillion a year in the United States alone. And of course, it's many times that when extrapolated globally. The management tax is more than just a financial and economic cost. It's a moral cost because we're literally wasting people's lives on work that doesn't matter. The cost of bureaucracy. Number 2, I would argue that engagement statistics are holding us back as individuals and as societies. Most organizations that measure engagement, whether Gallup or Blessing White or others, find that 2/3 to 3/4 of workers are disengaged at work. Gallup has estimated that up to 20% of American workers are actively disengaged at work, actively undermining their own workplaces through harassment, bullying, drug use, absenteeism, and all the other dysfunctions of the modern workplace. And Gallup estimates these costs at about $500 billion a year in the United States alone, a staggering amount. Then we have the qualitative factors. I would argue number 3, the modern traditional management system is very dehumanizing, particularly in the language that it uses. So in the 1980s, we started talking about human resources. Well, the fact of the matter is people aren't resources, they're human beings. And just because we entered a re-engineering craze and moved away from the use of the word personnel and personnel offices doesn't mean that we change from humans into resources, a very dehumanizing term. We talk about direct reports as if people are file folders. We talk about man hours as if women don't exist. And we talk about headcount as if people don't have bodies. The language of HR is very demeaning and dehumanizing. A fourth cost of traditional management is anxiety. The executive ranks are riven with anxiety. IBM did a study a few years ago called Capitalizing on Complexity, and they found that most executives doubt their own ability to manage complexity in the workplace. This isn't good. This isn't healthy. We don't want people losing sleep or losing their health, but we're finding that with the accelerating pace of change in technology, blockchain, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, nanotechnology, robotics, genetic engineering. Now we have 4D printing, already moved beyond 3D printing. People are feeling anxious. They're feeling afraid. They're losing their sleep. They're losing health. That's not a good thing. It's not a healthy thing. This technology is outpacing human capacity to absorb change. Not good. And fifthly, I would argue that traditional management distorts perspectives. If we have a number of people who are competing for a finite number of slots at the top of a hierarchical pyramid, that doesn't encourage teamwork. And if I'm focused on pleasing my boss at work, who's pleasing the customer? We have traditional management hierarchies that are getting in the way of actually delivering value to the customer, to people that matter. So we've got all these costs of traditional bureaucracy, but we do have a way out. To escape the clutches of bureaucracy, we must consider adopting NoLimits SelfManagement. What is NoLimits SelfManagement? Well, it's management that gives people optimal agency and autonomy and clarity around their roles and responsibilities. Dee Hock was the founder of Visa, and he famously said that complex rules cause simple, stupid behavior, and that simple rules allow for complex, intelligent behavior. So can we organize around simple principles that allow people to express their creativity, their intelligence, their leadership, and optimize their value creation at the highest possible level? And I think we can through the power of NoLimits SelfManagement. My experience with NoLimits SelfManagement is that I was able to help a startup company here in California called Morningstar. And we met together as a little startup team 31 years ago, a tiny band of 24 people, and we agreed on very simple principles on how to govern ourselves. The principles were don't use force or coercion against other people and keep your commitments. We organized around those two simple principles, as lauded by Dee Hock, the founder of Visa, and we grew from zero to become the largest tomato processor in the world. And virtually everyone in North America has eaten our products and millions more around the world because we export worldwide. We've never had a traditional org chart. In fact, this is the org chart of Morningstar. It's a dynamic hierarchy of self-managing, self-governing individuals who come together, form teams in response to needs in the marketplace and elsewhere, and then dissolve those teams when they're no longer needed. A dynamic hierarchy of self-managed professionals. We actually have a time-lapse video of how these teams came together in our original factory. NoLimits SelfManagement is based on agreements between peers that are dynamic, that are flexible, that are adaptive, that are agile. Allow us to transcend the costs and limitations of traditional organizational management and soar to new heights and scale without limitation. And I'd be happy to answer questions and discuss. Thanks.